After getting a glimpse of the first image for the original Xenoblade Chronicles so many years ago, I never in my wildest dreams assumed we'd be welcoming multiple sequels. Xenoblade Chronicles 3, arguably the most accessible entry so far, is yet another example of why I'm glad that Monolith Soft is sticking with it. With a relatable and easy to understand premise, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 has a much faster startup time than many other JRPGs. Time and what you choose to do with it is a huge theme, and it's the emotional crux of the narrative. Our core 6 party members all have a limited lifespan in service of warring kingdoms. As a result of a twist of fate, they end up meeting under auspicious circumstances. There's a lot of flashbacks interspersed into the story as time goes on, which both inform the macro narrative and help flesh out the main characters. You get real wizard school vibes as teams of kids with powers compete with one another to make choices that impact their relationships in the current day. There's a push and pull here that reverberates throughout the entire game. The constant conflict of this world is what makes things really interesting. We get to see plenty of examples of provincial life as well as some silly downtime, all juxtaposed to the horrific realities of the battlefield. Since dead soldiers' souls fuel the machines of war on either side, things get heavy. Allowing the heart of the party to serve as Offseers, trained officers who are meant to usher souls into the afterlife after falling a battle, provides an emphatic, relatable lens through which to take in the story. I have to say, I bought into this world hook, line, and sinker just 5 or so hours in. At that point, I had met the main party, and I was addicted to finding out what would happen to everyone. Given, the concept of predetermined death and limited lifespans, it's deeply contemplative at times. The relationships everyone has with one another are a huge part of why I bought in. Since each half of the core 6 come from different sides of the war, each person has a different take on the situation or a different attitude, and it doesn't always mesh well with the other faction. Aging as an abhorrent foreign concept is a classic sci-fi trope, but it's played with here in an interesting way that makes sense within its own universe. I'm also a sucker for marked for death storylines because of the inherent tension within. While a lot of people will likely balk at any form of Switch visuals, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is impressive looking by any standard. I took a ton of screenshots of this gorgeous world for fun that I look forward to drip feeding out once the spoiler statute of limitations is done and dusted. And it's all backed by an incredible soundtrack that may or may not get snubbed at the Game Awards. One of my only hangups when it comes to the visual style is the animations during some cutscenes. They can look wooden, especially when the characters move and run in and out of set pieces. It really does sport some cool action sequences, and for those who don't dig the Xenoblade dubs, dual audio is there for you. With that in mind, I love this dub. With dialogue like "Spark that," "Defo," "How much magic power has this geek got," and "Queen bitch," it runs the gamut of wonderfully campy to straight up laugh out loud hilarious. The spirited performances can get downright sassy, especially if we're talking Uni, the queen of sass. The stoic Nopon Riku also brings a nice counterbalance to the otherwise peppy and loud Nopon creatures in the series, and I'm always down just to hang out with this crew. Plus, who cannot love an NPC vendor named Shill Shill? Xenoblade Chronicles 3 lets you know that, yes, this is a Xenoblade sequel, but it also has its own rules. Exploration is a lot more fun because the sandboxes are generally bigger, and the ability to zoom in or out and swap party members is a nice touch in terms of immersion. Breadcrumb trails are available as an optional toggle to cut out the aimlessness, and the map automatically checkpoints points of interest for you without an obnoxious map full of pointless pins. The game nudges you in the direction of participating without pulling teeth, encouraging players to talk to people for the first time for small reputation gain. There's even bonuses for faster swimming, better meals, a quicker run speed, and so on. Quests are often uncovered in the overworld with traditional menu-based quest lists, or through talking with your party in a camp after hearing rumors while out and about. With supply drops happening amid things like double-sided conflicts and shiny monsters indicating bigger loot rewards, there's always something going on. Convenient fast travel and save anywhere features are back for Xenoblade Chronicles 3. And although there are droves of tutorials, most of them are quick text boxes you can just skip. One of the only technical issues I've had with the game involved a few frame rate drops in specific areas where there is a lot going on. But in my personal experience, most of that was in cutscenes. I had encountered one stretch of the game where load times was a bit longer than normal, which was solved by rebooting the game. All told, any inconveniences were minor, but your threshold of frame rate terror could be different. Similar to other Xenoblade games, combat starts off very simplistic with an emphasis on auto-attacking and occasionally popping an art, which is an ability. At first, there's no real downside to just spamming arts when they come up, and you can't swap classes or try out new builds readily. There are a few nuances, though, that carry on throughout the rest of the game. Canceling auto attacks into arts is optimal, as is canceling arts into supers. Some classes can also throw down healing or buff rings, and select bosses toss debuff and damage rings on the ground to avoid. With easy to read aggro lines, you can see how you need to adjust or swap between party members to regain aggro or heal up the party. Roughly 5 to 10 hours in, you'll unlock the class system, which opens up party customization. Although everyone starts with a core function that's governed by 3 roles, attacker, defender, or healer, you'll slowly unlock the ability for any party member to swap to any role. As you level up, you'll unlock more accessories and gem slots, more classes, and it's off to the personalization races. Passives, art alterations, combo potential, gems that have special effects, it's all on the table. I started to experiment with builds like off tanks that were mainly damage oriented but could grab enemies and take the heat off if the main tank falls in battle. The sheer number of support classes also encourages strategy beyond raw healing, with buffs and offensive spells in the mix. I eagerly maxed out every class in one of the 3 roles for each character so I could mix and match my arts. Opening up 3 more slots for cross-class arts is key. So as I'm mentioning quite a bit in the review, the core party of 6 is static. You get a 7th guest hero party member too. Some are optional and off the beaten path, and several are acquired via the story. These are automated characters that have static equipment and presets, but they add a little fluff to combat, and they can shore up party weaknesses if you want to go with an unconventional lineup. Then you have the Ouroboros system, which, to be very vague and overly simplistic about it, combines 2 characters into one controllable mech in combat, sort of reminiscent of Xenogears. While there are naturally 3 combinations of Ouroboros links, each person has their own unique Ouroboros form and skill tree. I told you, there would be layers. In theory, using Ouroboros in combat presents an interesting twist, as it technically eliminates 2 party members in favor of 1 body. So you'd potentially lose out on a healer or tank by linking them up. However, I wish the system was a bit more sparing in nature, or tweaked a bit. Depending on how you get on with it, it could be seen as an extra thing to micromanage that takes away from the fun builds you spend a ton of time tweaking. While there's some light customization for Ouroboros, it's not nearly as in-depth as the class system, and the ability to freely swap into Ouroboros form wasn't as tantalizing or satisfying as I expected it to be. Of course, it has its strategic uses. If a party member is about to die or draws aggro when they shouldn't, you can swap to Ouroboros form for respite, which is protected by an overheat gauge rather than a traditional life bar. Once it overheats, you have to wait for a cooldown period to use it again with that particular pair. But in many encounters, especially overworld trash fights, you simply don't need it. Fighting elite foes can add some excitement to the festivities, but I found the Ouroboros system a tad oversaturated and wanted to see a little more meat on those bones. Once again though, Xenoblade 3 ties everything together and makes it all worthwhile. Ouroboros have a huge impact on the storyline, and every time I see the CPU make a decision to sync up 2 party members, I'd smile, as I'd recall the connections they had during the journey and their relationship. It evens out, and you don't even really need to use the Ouroboros if you don't like it. Because of the way everything funnels back into the emotional core, this isn't a bad first dip into the pool if you've never played a Xenoblade game before. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 didn't have to do a whole lot to keep me invested, because I was all in early on. The cast, the weight of the story, and the freedom of party composition are the power trio that won me over. Even during some of the slower moments of the narrative, I was fiddling with stats and loadouts and still driven by a need to see where everyone ends up. Thank you for watching today's review. If you enjoyed it, please remember to like and subscribe. To see the full written version of this review, more game reviews and game news, head on over to Destructoid.com.